Well, today on our show we have Vic Sinclair, the creator of The Positive Imperative and
Positive Music Imperative.
Two powerful sources of information and ways to get by in life and improve and enjoy. So welcome, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
Well, it's great to be here, and our viewers in the past like a diversity of information from a diverse group of people. So tell me about The Positive Imperative. Why?
I've been a study of the positive mental attitude, self-help movement, as you have for decades.
Because we're both 29, so...
Exactly. And never really got into it because I didn't want to do somebody else's shtick, quote unquote. If I had, I would have done Stephen Covey's. Like they have the whole thing, you can become a Stephen Covey coach, the whole 9 yards, but I just didn't want to do somebody else's stuff. But I definitely believed in it all. I definitely believed that if you got everybody in the same room and you started alphabetically from, I don't know, who's at the A's? Who's at the A's?
I know that's that Zig Ziglar, okay?
Yeah, Zig Ziglar. I know, you took my thunder. And you back up through Andrew Carnegie. I'll do the first names: Andrew Carnegie, Dale Carnegie, right through Anthony Robbins, Wayne Dyer.
Og Mandino's one of my favorites.
Right, and they all agree in 90% of the same stuff. They have different ways, and Wayne Dyer will be pensive and thought-provoking and very quiet and serene, and Anthony Robbins gets on the table and says, "Oh!"
It's true.
You know, and that's the nature of it, so you pick your medicine, whatever's best for you.
Exactly.
A lot of them deal in positivity and psychology and being positive, and the issue was, do I bring something new to the table, and what do I bring? And I swear to God, it does happen. There is the light bulb moment, eureka, at 5 o'clock in the morning. You do wake up, you run to the desk, and you start to scribble.
Yep.
Or
keyboard in my case.
And I usually keyboard, but I remember in this case it was a tablet of paper, and I just scrolled and scrolled and scrolled and scrolled and scrolled, and it was just that eureka, and that's the power of the subconscious again. It's just kind of melting what's new, what's missing. And the positive imperative, really the majority of the basic foundation unfolded really within an hour.
But based on several years of reading.
Yes, oh absolutely, and I would acknowledge everybody I just mentioned as a piece of that puzzle that helps that Genesis seed. So I believe in one of Stephen Covey's rules is all about interdependence.
Yes.
And I believe in that. So and this isn't an ego thing, this is not about Victor Sinclair, this is just about, do I have something of value add to leave as my legacy for my grandchildren and their generations after them.
Because each personality, though, processes the information from others differently,
Absolutely.
And then we put it out differently, and that's better for somebody else than somebody else's way.
Absolutely.
So I love Og Mandino and Zig Ziglar and Tony Robbins, and I've had friends go, "Oh, but I don't like this one. How can you stand?" And I go, "Well, but for me, this guy helped me with this piece, but this piece of his work left me cold."
Right.
So I went over to this guy, and it was like the light bulb moment. It was like, "Oh, easy." And for me, time management, Alan Lakian,
right
from California.
Yeah.
I just loved it.
Yeah.
A, B, C's priorities in life, and C's are getting in the way, and B's are either A's or they're C's, so make a choice.
And every one of those pieces of the puzzle, for another person will be psycho-cybernetics, for another person will be Dennis Waitley, for another person it will be the Anthony Robbins, going and walking the stones of fire. It doesn't really matter as long as it boosts you to the next level to evolve.
Yep.
That's really the issue. So so that morning I started to scroll, and it certainly occurred to me that there was things about the positivity movement that had not been talked about. The very, very first one is the dynamics of neutrals. I believe it's the cancer of society today. And it's neutral to me is defined as sitting on the fence. You could have a whole list of words, and it would include apathy and lethargy and a bunch of other words, but basically it's when you do nothing about your environment, the world, your home and school association, your political situation, you just sit on the fence and do nothing.
Right.
And I believe that there is no such thing as truly a neutral. Neutrals are negative. However, having said that, the next major thing that occurred to me was what I call the posi ratio. And really, neutrals do damage in the sense of, you're not really doing anything or contributing anything. But if you believe in that adage, you're either moving forward or you're moving backwards. If you're not moving at all and the rest of the world's moving forward, let's say you're a young executive and you sit on your laurels and the other guys are going to the Dale Carnegie seminar and the other guys are going to a webinar
And Toastmasters and other things.
Toastmasters and other things, the local chamber, and you're doing nothing, then you're falling behind.
I had a sales manager used to say the trouble with being average is you drag the average down.
Right.
And so he said, I want you to pick a few parts of your career and try to be and work towards and achieve being in the top third of those items. You can't be in the top 1% of everything 100% of the time. You have to sleep, you have to have a life. But pick a few things and be exceptional.
Absolutely.
And I got promoted 4 times in 10 years. And his advice that pick these areas, we need them as a company, pick these areas possibly for your professional development and then chase hard. And it was great advice, so I really believe that you're right, that neutrals really are damaging.
And not only that, I mean, if you put it into a certain context, let's say parenting, everybody knows negative and abusive parenting. We won't talk about that for just now. The easiest thing for neutral parenting is just don't show up and or don't be proactive with the parenting of your children. And for me, it's quantity and quality. It can't be one or the other, but so many people are time impoverished right now. It's all about the quality of life, and therefore it's okay to work at the office until it's 8 o'clock at night, 4 or 5 nights a week, and then run home and say, well, Saturday we're going to go to the zoo, and maybe Sunday we'll have a family picnic, and then back to Monday, and I don't see the kids Monday to Friday. Well, if your kid's been bullied on Tuesday, and you're not there for Wednesday morning breakfast because you already left at 6 o'clock in the morning, you're not there. And that's really neutral parenting to me. And a lot of others is just an apathy and not being the leader, et cetera, et cetera.
The CBC, our news network that's for Canada, in Canada, talked about that from a different perspective, that the cost of commuting. And they interviewed a set of parents who moved at great cost to be closer to work. And then TVO in this past week had a show where a man said, I choose to live close to work, but we figured out it costs us in property taxes and a bigger mortgage $100 a day to live closer to work. But he said, that's a price we're willing to pay because of family time, quality of life time, so we do without other things.
It's a paradigm shift. I remember when I ran the American Chamber of Commerce in Canada, one of my members was AON, and I went to visit the president of his building at the foot of Bay Street, and out comes this, these 2 girls with this long chain of preschoolers, and the daycare was right in the office building. So I mean, there's lots of different things you can change as far as what you're making in decisions and choices and consequences, because it is quality plus quantity. You have to have both.
Yeah.
So we talked about neutrals. Negatives to me is obviously obvious, but I don't think that people put into context that negatives do 10 times the damage. So there's no situation where you can look at a mass shooting in Connecticut, in Newtown, or any other really tragic experience where you can't find a whole chain of other negatives. And it really is like those dominoes. So every negative does 10 times the dominoes. We have this misconception in the world that a positive cancels out a negative, and it does not work.
Not a chance.
So the reality is that my proverbial easy one to explain, well, you can have a best friend for 40 years and actually be neighbors and friends and the whole 9 yards, and you sleep with his wife, and the 40 years go out the door in 3 minutes flat, if you're so lucky to be 3 minutes. And that's how fast a negative can kill a positive.
Yeah.
You can have a great employee and then say a racial slur. That normally you weren't going to be caught, but he caught you at the water cooler with one of the other executives, and boom, the trust factor and the loyalty went down in a handbag.
Negatives destroy trust.
Absolutely.
And trust takes time.
And trust
means I can turn my back to you and feel physically safe.
Right.
And if I don't feel physically safe around you, or emotionally or financially safe, you've really, it's broken, it's fractured.
You just led into the other dynamic.
Oh.
Trust takes time. Positives, meaningful positives, take 10 times the energy. And that, I think, is probably one of the biggest voids in our society, where we think that, if I smoke a cigarette and I work out at the gym, it's a wash. No, it's not that simple. But we think that all the time. Our minds are very contrived when it comes to this rationalization because of different parts of the mind that we're learning about on a day-to-day basis. But positives, and the one I'll talk about, well, there's obvious ones, like it takes 3 to 5 years to build a World Trade Center and it takes 30 minutes to knock it down. But the obvious one is to grow a human being. You know, it can take 20, 30, 40 years to build a great, terrific human being, and lots of time, energy, sweat, toil, you know, sparks, guides, brownies, you know, the hockey in 4 o'clock in the morning.
Public school teachers, parenting, yep.
The whole 9 yards, but it takes 30 seconds to snuff out the life of a 16-year-old because you were walking down Yonge Street on Christmas Eve and you were just flying bullets around the city of Toronto in a gang shootout at the OK Corral. Having said that, they were grieving at our school and getting counseling 4 years after that fact, as were the parents of the kids that were charged.
Sure.
You know, so I mean, one negative again does hundreds of elements of damage, but we don't understand that as a society. So the issue becomes, once you understand that everything in this world, and that's back to the first time again, everything you do in this world is positive, neutral, negative. It's not just, we're going to have a positive motivational session because we go to Amway and we're in a multi-level marketing, we're going to rah-rah system, blah, and then we're going to go out and drive like an idiot on the 401. No. So the issue of positivity means positivity to be congruent. And lines of congruent go parallel, means your values and what you do are in sync. Then at the end of the day, you have to be positive in all things or you're incongruent. The issue of parenting, if you say, do as I say and not as I do, red light.
Fail.
At the end of the day. So now the issue is, what did you know, when did you know about it, what did you do about it? So once you've been sort of accentuated to the fact that, yes, I can drive my car in a positive, neutral, or negative fashion, right? And did you know that road rage in the city of Toronto kills 635 people a year? Just in the GTA.
Didn't know that.
635 people just because a negative makes a negative, and I cut you off, and you cut me off, and I give you the finger, and then I'm now right and you're wrong, and that's
and one of us kills somebody else, and we will just drive away.
Right, we cut somebody off. That happened on the 410. A lady with 4 children. The van did a rollover because somebody swerved into her way, cut her off. And a lot of drivers don't have defensive driving, so they overreact, and boom, that's it. So if you look at the fact that you have a choice every time you get into your car, and it isn't, the Ministry of Transport used to do this wonderful video of turning a person into a machine gun at the back of a snowplow. But we think we're enclosed, and therefore we can be rude to a person. We wouldn't be rude walking in the line or standing in line, but I think even that's going the way of the door bird in a lot of cases.
Yes.
But when it's driving, it really doesn't matter, because you can flip the bird at anybody, tell them off, and they'll never know who you are. You can just vent in your hostilities, and you don't have to be civil.
Yes.
Well, that's a load of bunk.
Yep.
It's ridiculous. And at the end of the day, obviously you can be negative, and you can cut people off, and you can be totally, droned into your little 4x4, or you can be positive and realize that every positive thing you do, whether it's waving to the person, letting them in, creates more positives.
It's emotional bank accounts, to go back to Covey.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. We cut each other off. We're draining the bank accounts. We cut each other off. We treat each other with dignity and respect. We're building, and it makes the traffic flow better. It makes the trip less stressful, and I would suggest it cuts down on the wear and tear on our cars.
No kidding. So neutral is all about, maybe doing other negatives like text driving, or just listening to your music, or just putting your mind in neutral, because it's the same commute you do every day, and you're traveling along the expressway, and it could be I-75 in the States or any other expressway. And I know the one in Connecticut, for example, when you go through all the little towns, they've got like a 12-foot ramp, and you're just oblivious to it. Like, there's a car coming in, you have all the room to move over, but you don't. So at the end of the day, they're coming out, they have to gain speed, there's lots of cars behind you, you just have to, that's at the end of the day. And you're just not being considerate, and you don't move over, right? And back to Stephen Covey, interdependence. So therefore, if we are our brother's keeper, treat everybody like it's your grandmother in the car that's beside you. And then what happens to your driving? It's like all of a sudden you make all these considerations. You have a paradigm shift, and your story changes. So at this point, it's not the a-hole that's driving to work and inconsiderate of you, it's your grandmother, maybe they're incompetent, yeah, they do cut you off, but they're not good at driving, and unfortunately, I'm very good at driving. I've taught 30 people drive, and that becomes my Achilles heel. I can be too good, and therefore your male ego can kick in the whole 9 yards. But the flip side of the coin is it took me years to really be considerate, to sit there and say, a lot of people are just struggling to get from point A to point B. They're afraid. They just never had the driving lessons. They've been afraid from day one. They're never safe, and they're afraid of looking in their blind spot for crashing into something. Just maybe not the most competent driver in the world. And I drive on happy. You drive on pissed off. And now it's like I got to get ahead of this guy and show him that he's really a bad driver. It's my duty because he shouldn't get away with that.
I met a sales manager in the US and they gave 2 awards every year to their sales team. One for the most sales, and one was for the most improvements to the process or customer retention. Something not driven by how many extra dollars did you bring in. It was something you did for the customers, for the company. And he said, we always make them red because it's part of the company colors. He said, more than once I've been there delivering a nice $50,000 set of vehicle as an award because they don't know what's happening until they show up to work that day. And what do people say? Oh, that color will show up to the cops more. Oh, that color is... And he said, can't we just be happy with others' successes? No, we got to tear it down to our level of incompetence and discomfort.
Right, and again, everything's looking through a prism.
Yep.
And therefore, if you're going to look through the prism, negative people will be the ones that are more tended to go on a witch hunt because they're looking for something under the rock, and they invariably always find and justify what they're looking for. Negativity. Positive person does the same thing, which helps your life. It's pretty simple at the end of the day.
One builds and one tears.
One builds and one tears. So that essentially brings me to my next conversation on the positive imperative. You know? So over and above the study of positivity, because again, it's like exercise. You can't say, oh, I exercised last week and it's going to help me today. Sorry, no, it doesn't work, right? It's as good as your daily routine.
Yeah, so somewhere after 7 days, doesn't matter how many years we exercise, it started downhill, baby.
Pretty much, because we live in what could be deemed as a negative world. All you have to do is turn on the news. Read the newspaper, and it's an 8 to 10 to 1 ratio of negative news versus positive news. So it's very easy to pick up that, and there's just enough negative people in the world, and you see one element story like a Newtown shooting can just blow your week, your month, whatever. Because for a lot of us, I've got two girls teaching in the Peel education system. One of them teaches grade 2, and the other's in high school. But in either case, the teacher was your daughter.
Yeah.
Just as simple as that. And you're sitting there, and it can just blow your mind and tear it apart unless you can harness it.
Yeah.
So the study of positivity means it's a daily event, but it's also studying positivity in all things in your life. It's being, and I'll talk about one of our programs, Posi Words. It's like being aware of your vocabulary. I'll get back to it in a minute. Part of your vocabulary is positive, neutral, negative. We live in a world that's ego-driven, and therefore some of our vocabulary has to evolve. We have 1,000 words for insane and about 5 words for sane. That's about the ratio, right? And just go through them, sane, loose, and then you run out. But wacko, weirdo, idiot, fool,
moron,
joker, jester, moron, crazy, wacko. You just, I mean, trust me, you can do the thesaurus synonym thing, and you'll go forever on crazy. But very, very succinct on sane. So we'd like to evolve some of our dialogue and words, and here's 2 big paradigm shifts for everybody. Number 1, good, bad. Good, bad. Well, that's subjective evaluation. And I'm not talking about, again, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, people. So I'm not saying we strike good from our vocabulary. Yes, it's okay to say good dog. That's fine. But the flip side of the coin is when we say, that's good and that's bad, we build walls. And it's a subjective evaluation of our truth versus somebody else's truth. And my conversation revolves around, is it positive, which is healthy and uplifting and building? Or is it negative, which is degenerative, right?
Yes.
Which hurts and tears down. That's it. And therefore you take out all the ego and the baggage and the subjective and the whole heritage of your education and your perspective, and you just look at the situation and say, is it helpful, healthy, positive, or is it not? It's negative. Another conversation over and above right, wrong. over and above good, bad is right, wrong, right? So there's good, bad, right, wrong. Good, bad is one thing, right and wrong is a total another. And again, the issue is, well, if I'm right, you're wrong. No. There's many truths in this world, and as we start to learn, that again is ego-based, and when you get down to the basics of humanity, certainly there are things that are wrong that people do, quote unquote, so again, don't throw out the baby in the bathwater. Infanticide is wrong. You don't have to think about that as far as morals and values goes. But the flip side of the coin is if you talk about what's right, is wind better than nuclear? You get into all this conjecture, ego, and perspective, right? And the issue is, how do we get people talking in unison and succinct? Mother Teresa's, one of her famous quotes is, if you ask me to come to an anti-war protest, I will never come. If you ask me to come to a peace rally, I'll be there in a heartbeat. And the issue is, if you look at US politics, you could have the, save our troops group over here, no war group over here, and traditionally what they do is fight. They make each other wrong. At the end of the day, you look at them and say, but who wants peace? And everybody changes in the same direction and says, we do. And at the end of the day, now you can have a dialogue about how you achieve peace, as opposed to making the other side wrong. Your kids are wrong for being in war, your kids are wrong for taking up arms, your kids, as soon as you make somebody else wrong, there's no dialogue.
And you're not being positive.
And you're not being positive. So evolving our vocabulary from better succinct terminology to say this is positive, this is negative, throw it right, wrong, throw it good, bad, as much as possible in the subjective evaluation of things, and keep it for certain words like, yes, you are a good dog, don't worry about that. But having said that, we have a negative vocabulary.
Yes.
I have to check and balance myself every minute of the day. I said, don't worry about that. Don't and worry. Right? So PosiWords is one of our programs that we started based on the fact that one of the authors of Chicken Soup for the Soul, Jack Canfield, said, kids today hear 436 negative words to 16 positive. That's ridiculous. Because you are what you think, and if you're hearing negative words, don't do that.
Well, there's a doctor from Arizona who said that 81 to 82% of the average person's thoughts were framed in the negative.
Right.
So not a nice day today, oh, it's too bright. Not a beautiful sunny day, oh, it's kind of cool.
Exactly.
And he said, so then we wonder why we underachieve, we're not happy. No, I totally think that PosiWords are a very vital source.
And these words are just food for your mind. So at the end of the day, one positive word creates another positive word. We've also discussed the fact that words like harmony, you can, and that's back to the study of positivity, you can study the word harmony and it has so many ramifications, and then as you get deeper to it, it's not just oh, it's a wonderful barbershop quartet if you're talking musically. It's like, oh, I actually have to listen to the other people, seek first to understand and be understood in order for me to participate and to be interdependent so that my vocal takes on a chord and a note that is harmonious and in sync with the rest of the singers. It takes effort. You can't sing in a barbershop quartet if you're an egotist or if you are blindly going about your world and not tuned in.
Yes.
Right? So you have to be in the receptive mode. So just a simple word that we know as harmony is important. Norman Vincent Peale coined a word called possibilitarian, right? Which I love, and the only people that have picked it up now is the Urban Dictionary, but it's just all about believing in possibilities as opposed to self-imposed limitations. So again, it's a dialogue that we have. Can't is a conversation that 80% of the school kids have today. Can't, won't, not going to happen, the list goes on and on. How many kids talk about possibilitarian? That anything is possible, and then go through things like Candy Littner starting mad, one human being, and going through the possibilities of anybody being able to do anything, and there's 1,000 great examples of it, and you can just pick your one. And to me, the vocabulary has to get changed. Even when we reply in a memo, and you ask somebody to do something, they'll say, sure, no problem. And you look at the words and the word no and problem. It's like, oh, no problem. And, you do something nice for somebody. Oh, think nothing of it. Everything is negative, 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 negative. Instead of an opportunity when somebody does something nice for you, or you've done something nice for them, and instead of saying think nothing of it, you could actually embrace their gratitude and say, well, I am so glad you appreciate that. Now what's going to happen at that point? They're going to feel good that they gave you a gratitude bouquet.
Absolutely.
And that ratifies their gratitude. When you say, no, think nothing of it, it's like, oh, you just slapped my gift in my face, and I guess I won't do that again. So again, that's where negatives make negatives and make negatives, and you get conditioned that everybody says, oh, think nothing of it, you shouldn't mention it. We discount that whole element instead of saying, yeah, we should all compliment and give ourselves gratitude every day of the week. And miss that opportunity.
At one point for 8 years, I taught job search to people that were long-term unemployed. And we called it the modesty trap, because you'd say to somebody, so tell me about 1 or 2 or 3 of the gifts you bring to the workplace. And I'd get people that were highly educated, highly accomplished, great track record, and they'd do what I call the Eeyore issue. Well, you know. And their whole tone of voice was they were barely adequate and worthy of time or attention, never mind a paycheck. And so I helped a young lady who was making under $30,000 a year, and that's an okay number, but it's not a great number to live in a great big city like Toronto. And after several coaching sessions, I had, chin up, look me in the eye, we're equal and different, no more Eeyore. Oh, well, I'd be interested in this opportunity because I offer the following attributes in the workplace. And the person I started with, and after a lot of coaching, was like, same person, but the new one made $9,800 more in the same industry doing the same job, another company, because the next company knew what she was capable of. The first one hired her to fill was a warm body to fill a spot.
I think a lot of people don't jump into the positivity bandwagon because, again, fear of failure, the biggest fear of them all. And the issue becomes, well, if I can't be perfect, and therefore I'm not going to embrace positivity and go that route, because people will point at me and say, oh, well, see, you're a hypocrite because you're not, you can be positive, but you can't do that over there. Again, the issue is don't throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah.
This isn't about being perfect people. This is about essentially sticking to your road, and you will fail, you will fall off the horse, get back up the horse, and continue on the journey. That's what
do it again.
And do it again. Human living is all about failure. The old Edison thing, 1,001 failures create 1 success. Well, if it's a light bulb, it's a pretty good success. So at the end of the day, it's not about being perfect. That's not what positivity is about. It's just about a commitment to do your best to be positive in all things, and that's not rocket science. But when that happens, you start to build a law, of your own life in positivity. The foundation starts the law of displacement. And when you build a rock of foundation of positivity, because you read Norman Vincent Peale, you read Napoleon Hill, which is 2 of the most read books on positivity ever going. I didn't invent positivity, folks. It's been around for decades. But having said that, I do believe I propose that it actually is a study. It could be a subject in school.
Well,
kids take every year.
We have to study it ourselves for us to have the healthiest, safest outcomes.
Absolutely.
We got interested in meeting each other because we share a similar philosophy. I call it resiliency, and that's what the research I look at. You look at positivity, but they're greatly overlapped and deeply enmeshed.
Absolutely. They're very congruent.
But it helps with mental health, huge impacts on physical health. And of course, I had somebody once confuse that with, well, if I have cancer and I'm positive, that's not going to help me live. I didn't say that. I said it'll help you have a better quality journey. Oh.
And put you in the best condition to be receptive to that which will work for you. Again, we're reading more and more books on the brain and how the brain and neuroplasticity can adjust your health. And the issue is, when you're negative, you've already shut that part of the possibilities down. And when you're positive, you've opened up the possibilities. So yeah, you can't guarantee anybody, and that would be foolish to do. The flip side of the coin is all you want to do is put yourself in the best position to succeed.
Absolutely.
And that's got to be positive.
And that means that you're approachable when you're positive too.
Absolutely.
Unless you're the jumping on the table and screaming and shouting over the top positive, most of us are very approachable if we're positive.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, at the end of the day, that's being open-minded, and that's back to being a possibilitarian.
Yes.
So positive words is now looking at creating new words because there's just not enough positive words. So
I have a niece that's very, very wise. By a young age, 3 and 4, she liked to use words because she was smart enough to recognize her mommy and daddy were good with words, and so she would use words. So whether they're hers or not, she taught me ginormous. It's bigger than gigantic, it's bigger than enormous, it's ginormous.
right.
And it's just a fun little thing we have that every now and again I say, how's your day? It's good. I said, it's not ginormously wonderful? But new words can get us to see things in a new light and open our minds to the opportunities.
And they displace the negative words.
Yes.
So that is, again, the more you use this, the more you don't use this.
I agree.
And that's the issue. I had one intern when I ran the American Chamber of Commerce that said, no problem, no problem. I got her best friend, so that was Ramita, then I got Moisa, and Moisa answered everything to me perfect. When I asked her to do anything, she'd just answer one word. If she understood it, it was perfect. And I adopted that ever since then, because the juxtaposition of no problem versus perfect is like, well, about 180 degrees.
Absolutely.
And again, we study the issue is that you are the energy that you're around. People have auras, people have energy, they have bad energy, negative energy, positive karma, and your words contribute to that, your thoughts contribute to that. You are the books you read, the thoughts you have, the food you eat, the company you keep, and the music you listen to, which is another element of the positive imperative that we'll talk about in another episode, is music is positive, neutral, negative. And it's our number one occupation in our time at this point in our lives with programs like American Idol and The Voice and all the other reality TV shows. We listen and consume music, but we have no idea what it does to us. And in fact, it can enable us to negativity.
Yes.
You know, I feel sorry about my past, my breakup of the 70s. I'm going to listen to Desperado by the Eagles one more time, and that's just going to put me in a funk, and I'm going to stay there.
Yeah, I always say it's okay to visit a funk. It's called being human.
Absolutely.
It's a lousy place to live in and deliberately revisit.
Right, but what happens all the time is we live there.
Yep.
And 80% of music is also negative. It's about relationship. I mean, I love Adele's music. She does great.
Oh.
But every one of her songs drives me to distraction every time it's on, because 90% of it's negative. It's about bad relationships. And I get it, it's nice to visit, but if I'm visiting for the 46th time this week, that's exactly, it's not a good scenario.
What we think and feel changes our body chemistry, and it helps heal or hurts us.
Right, exactly.
And so positivity isn't just, the sun is out and I'll be a rosy thinker. No, it's about a realistic, research-proven mindset that changes our happiness and our health.
Right, and again, as we evolve, positivity is nice, but it's all about positive actions. So positive imperative is embracing programs. The first one is already rolled out as Posi Words. We're going to do Posi Thanks, which is programming gratitude. Why? Because if you're grateful for things, you can't be complaining. Law of displacement kicks in again.
Yep.
And our ultimate one that we're going to kick off is the Posi Driving one, because we've thought about this long before distracted driving, which is just aided and abetted careless driving. And I say careless driving not as in the charge, as in people's everyday driving habits. If we knock down the road rage from 465 to 365 in Toronto, the GTA, is that a pretty amazing thing?
Yeah.
And if that program works in Toronto, will it work in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and Los Angeles and Athens and Paris and London? So again, it's just about the awareness issue. The more you accentuate the positive, and again, that's one of the first positive songs ever written by Bing Crosby. There's no place to talk about. There's so many studies that imperatively basically prove to you that it's right. You can't lose your temper when you're laughing.
No.
Physically impossible.
And I can tell you for sure that when I had my health issues, going out of my way to have fun so I would laugh. Remember, somebody said I was lucky that I was happy. I went, whoa, I could be dead in 6 months. I've chosen to plan happiness into my life every day.
And it's all about a choice.
And it was a choice. So I had books of Herman Unger cartoons, which was popular during my day. Calvin and Hobbes.
Yep.
Recently, David Ford's written a book of cartoons with a little story beside each cartoon about his medical program. Ben Wicks.
That's one of my favorites.
It's all about choices.
Yeah.
And somebody said, how can you choose to be happy? It's like, well, it's not just luck that I'm happy.
Think of it this way. A positive imperative basically says we're all going down a road. And there's a fork in the road. And then the road on the left is negative. and the road in the middle is neutral, and the road on the right is positive, so I'll use the right in the wrong context now. You can take the right road, you can kind of take the road that sits there and actually has a dead end and sit on the neutral, or you can continue bad habits, whether it's smoking or temper or whatever your negative habits is, and you can continue that road. It's a choice. Every time you come to that, it's how you embrace the choice is the issue of respond, right? Negative things are going to happen to us all. They can justify us going down any of those three roads, but at the end of the day, that justification becomes our ownership of choice. We choose to buy into that reality, and so therefore, yeah, I have cancer, and therefore life is a bitch, and I'm going to quit, and life's not fair. Or I can kind of say I'm just overwhelmed, and I'm not going to do anything, and I hope the doctors figure it out. Or I am not God. I do not have the genie in the bottle. I do not know whether I'm going to live or die. However, I am going to be progressive and, as you did, embrace the things that will put me in the best position to not only enjoy the journey as I go, and again, Michael J. Fox is the perfect person.
Absolutely.
His book, Always Looking Up, is perfect. It takes him an hour to put his feet in his shoes. And I don't think I've ever heard a negative word out of the guy's mouth in my life.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, it's how he responds. And would he be justified in going down the negative word? Sure. I mean, who could blame him? Would Candy Littner have been justified to be an alcoholic instead of creating mad? And who could cast aspersions or blame a person after they've lost their child, the world's worst, nightmare? She chose to respond and said, well, this is the most devastating thing that's ever happened in my life, but I don't want another parent to go through what I just went through. Therefore, I'm going to respond. And I'll tell you, back to possibilitarian, in my classes I used to teach at Trebas Institute, I used to divide my students into half, and I asked them point blank, do you think one person can change the drinking and driving laws of the world? And half the students would say yes, and half the students would say no. And then, depending on the campus and the classroom, I would split them in half and they'd face each other. And then I'd have the half that said, yeah, I think it can be done over here, and the half that said, no, it can't be done over here. And I'd look at this half and said, you've lost before you've even started, right? Like there's a horse race, and the bell goes and the gates open, your horses didn't start and theirs did. Because you thought it was impossible.
Yeah.
And therefore, the rest of the story is a lady by the name of Candy Littner who went state by state, congressman by congressman, senator by senator, in a day where drinking was an old boys' school accepted thing. Most were white, most drank after work at your local chamber of commerce or wherever they drove. It's a day when Elvis Presley movies had the mayor going to the gazebo and falling down drunk, and everybody laughed. And guess what? It was accepted back then.
Sure was.
And I believe her legacy, called MAD, is 100 and some odd thousand volunteers and 100 chapters around the world. And the world wouldn't be the same place it is today.
No.
And how many thousands of deaths has she prevented simply because of that movement?
Because before. So the positive imperative offers people a positive methodology of moving forward, staying open to possibilities.
And parameters and rules and rationales. Right, so I didn't even, positive values is another thing that we've got, which is 30 positive values that you can study and adopt as opposed to religion, quote unquote, that give you the foundation of positivity. I didn't invent those. One of our members, Dr. John Schinnerer from San Francisco, came up with those. We adopted them and put them in the positive imperative, and now that also gives you a roadmap.
Very good.
Is it on?
Yes. Oh, sorry. That's okay. Yep, we're on.
Okay.
4 minutes in. I have to edit the first minute out, but that's okay.
All right. So the last element I'll talk about the positive imperative is really positive values, right? Which is a gentleman by the name of Dr. John Schinnerer from San Francisco put together and actually studied positivity and positive music and the benefit of positive music. And when it came to values, he put together a core set of 30 values that everything you can do, from integrity to giving to gratitude, and he's kind of honed them down to the lowest common denominator and said, okay, basically these will cover just about everything that is of a positive value. And essentially, whether you're religious or you're not religious, this will give the sectors, the sectorial work, quote unquote, a roadmap. If you want to raise your kids, follow these 30 posse values, teach them at your breakfast or your Sunday brunches or whatever you do, and then you have a sort of a barometer of things to build in your kid's foundation. Invest, as opposed to letting them kind of watch TV and movies indiscriminately, which may be negative if you haven't got a key to the castle and your TV and all of a sudden they've got Ultimate Wrestling on and they're watching somebody kick somebody when they're down.
Yeah.
Well, that would be going this way, and again,
direction.
it's all a question of choices, and if you abdicate your responsibility of governing your children's viewing habits, and I'm not saying in the sense of policing, they have to make their own choices, and they have to evolve into the point where they're old enough to be able to do that. But by the same token, if you say, okay, put on the Disney Channel, and then you go leave, and then you're watching wrestling over here while they're watching Disney over here, it ain't gonna work. My kids will tell you, I sat through every episode of Little House on the Prairie with my kids, and one of the most gratifying days of my life was when my daughter bought her daughter season 7 of Little House on the Prairie. And I said, wow, it must have worked. Because we never left the room, right? Because Michael Landon, as a great producer and writer, had a positive value for every episode.
Yep.
He tackled old age, he tackled poverty, he tackled bullying. Every one of those episodes had a social media value.
Yep, they had meat, style, substance, content.
The whole nine.
It was all
I'd like to say vegetables, but yeah, they had the whole 9 yards at the end of the day. And to me, against the law of displacement, your kids watch those, they're going to absorb some of that.
Yes.
They had an episode on bullying. When I watched it again with my granddaughter for probably the 5th time, the light bulb went on again. It was like, wow, he really got it, and he got it way earlier than most people did with a lot of these topics.
Well, in his 20s, he was teased to his face, but mostly behind his back about his hair. And they weren't nice comments.
Right.
I think people were jealous. He was handsome. And he was successful.
Right, and
And so people would say nasty things. It's like, what's the problem with celebrating somebody else's success, which to me is a positive value.
Right. Absolutely. And at the end of the day, it's all about choices, how you raise your kids.
Yeah.
So again, the positive imperative is a rationale of studying positivity. It's understanding that there's a posi ratio and the importance, and therefore, because if you don't understand the posi ratio and you justify saying something negative to your kids, you forget the issue that that's a 10 times multiplier effect. And so you're tired and whatever, and you want to lose your cool. You have to acclimatize yourself that every time I do that, it's a 10 times multiplier, and therefore I can't afford to do that anymore. Or, and phrase in the positive, I choose to accentuate the positive and catch them doing something right, I think, as Dale Carnegie would say.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, you can focus on witch hunts and that your kid did everything wrong, or you can also bolster them and use, let's say, the 1-minute manager's philosophy of the sandwich philosophy of the compliment. Here's the corrective, and here's the third piece of bread, and put it together as a sandwich, and get your kid into corrective action, as opposed to, why did you do that? You always do that. Right? Every one of these things, like, you always do that. I'm fed up of you doing this, and the whole negative nomenclature of parenting is so easy to fall into that pitfall because we heard it for generations on television, and from our parents. So therefore, it's not about, again, being Pollyanna. The positive imperative is not about Pollyanna. The positive imperative is about positive thoughts, actions, music, and evolving the world. Because at the end of the day, it really is the best multiplier for having a safe and world that we all want to live in. That's it. Because at the end of the day, when you start to talk about positivity and redoing those words from good, bad, right, wrong, and you start to throw them into things like politics and how we govern our country and how we govern our environment and all these issues, well, now it's a very, very concrete choice that There's the positive and there's the negative, and there's ways to figure out the ones that are hard to figure out, because life is not always simple.
No.
But at the end of the day, if we're all working towards a positive, then at least we're all rowing in the same ship, and we can agree to disagree and move on and accept the adoption of whatever anybody has chosen. And that's the positive imperative.
Well, very good. Thank you very much. Informative as always.
I appreciate
And I know it'll be well used. We might even wear a little spot out on the YouTube channel.
that. You never know.